Very excited today, everybody. We're bringing in Tulsi Gabbard. She and I have been going back and forth for about 18 months trying to figure out how we could organize ourselves to get her on this stream, and we have finally done it. And she is someone I've admired for a long time. She's a person that's difficult not to like. She's a very appealing person with lots of interesting ideas, and I just appreciate the chance to come talk with her, and she's been very kind, and she's taking time away from her family and her vacation to spend a little time with me and with you today, so let's get right to it.
Our laws, as it pertains to substances, are draconian and bizarre. The psychopaths start this way. He was an alcoholic because of social media and pornography, PTSD, love addiction, fentanyl and heroin. Ridiculous.
I'm a doctor, for sake. Where the hell do you think I learned that?
I'm just saying, you go to treatment before you kill people.
I am a clinician. I observe things about these chemicals.
Let's just deal with what's real.
We used to get these calls on Loveline all the time.
Educate adolescents and to prevent and to treat.
If you have trouble you can't stop and you want to help stop it, I can help. I got a lot to say. I got a lot more to say.
Tulsi Gabbard is a woman of first.
The first American Samoan elected to Congress.
The first Hindu and one of the
first female combat veterans to ever serve.
She's the presidential candidate and Iraq War veteran.
I've dedicated my entire adult life to serving our country.
Someone who pulls no punches when it comes to speaking her mind.
No one else has been as effective at forcing a conversation on the failings and the future of American foreign policy.
Why were you the lone voice out there going after the neocons?
People in Washington love labels, and they've called me a lot of different things over the years.
Gabbard's seen as a rebel within her own party.
You have faced some really harsh criticism from fellow Democrats.
But what I care about is the truth and what's right.
Just calling it how she sees it.
You give me hope that there are politicians that are legitimately in it for the right reason.
I want somebody who loves the country. That's Tulsi Gabbard.
And that's who we are welcoming to the program right now. Tulsi, thank you for taking time out to talk to me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Drew. It's good to talk to you. Good to see you, at least from afar. And I'm so happy, as you said, it's been a little while. We've been going back and forth, but I'm so happy we finally doing it.
So I have a million questions for you. Obviously, Tulsi was in Congress for 8 years, 2013 to 2021. She's active military, where she is a lieutenant colonel. The intro says pretty much everything I was going to say, but there's things about your life that intrigue me. You're now an independent, right? You're neither Republican nor Democrat. Yes. Is that correct? Yeah.
That's right.
I'm the same. I spent a little time as a Republican, then I was a Democrat for a long time, and then I'm just like, I can't be a part of a party. I can't do it. And one of our founding fathers' most significant concerns was that faction would tear us apart. I spent the last couple of days reading a bunch of stuff about the founding fathers and some of their founding principles. I'm familiar with it, but I was sort of refamiliarizing myself with things. And their fear of parties was really profound. Their fear of faction was profound. They felt like faction was inevitable unless government sort of contained it. And the only way to contain it was with a government that was sort of balanced with lots of checks and balances. But is what going on? I want to try to figure out what's going on today. I'm hoping you'll help me figure things out. Are we being torn apart by faction? Is that what's happening to us, or is something else going on here?
There we go.
You're back. You froze for just a second. Go ahead.
Some of the reasons that I laid out when I announced that I was leaving the Democrat Party have a lot to do with this point of what exactly is tearing us apart, and how the leaders of today's Democrat Party are very, very different from they're representing values and principles that are very different from the values and principles that drew me to choose to become a Democrat 20 years ago when I first ran for state house here in Hawaii. And the problem with today's Democrat Party, and many of the reasons that led me to leave, had to do with the fact that they are tearing us apart, racializing everything, pitting us one against the other, whether it be based on partisanship or race or religion or ethnicity or any of the other labels that are often attached to us. They are pushing these radical, fanatical ideologies, essentially, with no respect for or appreciation for our fundamental freedoms, our God-given freedoms that are enshrined in the Constitution. Even worse than that, they are seeking to undermine those fundamental freedoms, not only with their actions and working with big tech and social media, but really when you have people in position of power who don't appreciate the importance of freedom of speech, of having this robust marketplace of ideas that our founders envisioned for this country, is they have the ability to politicize public institutions like the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security, Department of Education. You can go down the list of federal agencies that have been and are continuing to be politicized to target and go after political opponents or to further divide us. And that's really what is so dangerous with the situation that we're in and with the leadership of today's Democrat Party.
I literally, though, saw somebody tweet today that democracy and freedoms of speech were, forget what they said, white supremacy was how they referred to it, as all white supremacy, that these were all ideas that were used as colonializing principles that allowed people with a certain skin color and a certain history to act out on other parts of the world. Let me just, before I sort of ask you any question about that, I just got back yesterday from Spain and Portugal. If I seem out of it today, it's because I'm jet lagged. I'm traveling 20 hours and I'm too old to be doing that, Susan.
It's good for you for even doing this after that long trip.
Well, we listen, like I said, I really look forward to talking to you for a long time. And so I would not have missed this. We really kind of came back to talk to you, frankly. But there were two countries. Portugal established the slave trade. Spain expanded the slave trade and destroyed an indigenous people of an entire continent with the conquistadors. This was Spain and Portugal's history. And yet in both countries, when you go there, they celebrate their country, their history, their heritage, their culture, their art, and they acknowledge that there were some horrible things that happened 1,000 years ago that had nothing to do with the people, and thankfully that they're grateful that they've got this wonderful culture and country that they live in today. Horrible things happened. I don't in any way want to endorse it. And they can celebrate the world they live in with each other today and disagree with each other about a lot of stuff. I mean, Spain went through a civil war that was held together by a dictator for 50 years. I mean, they still can. It's shocking to me how much better behaved, for lack of a better word, that I found the citizens of those two countries to be as it pertained to their politics, with the most horrific histories in the world. They literally have the worst histories of any countries on earth, and yet they can celebrate themselves and their culture. Are they wrong for doing that? Is that all white supremacy, like the Twitter followers were saying today, that white supremacy is just what democracy is? Or is there something wrong with us that we cannot talk about our current situation without condemning everything that has led to the present moment?
I think that's exactly the point here, is when you have these so-called woke leaders of the Democratic Party today who are literally racializing everything, whether you're talking about the First Amendment or the Second Amendment, or as you're saying, democracy as a whole, as these are signs of the racist past, or these are racist ideas or principles in and of themselves, is just crazy. It's crazy. And it unfortunately has the negative consequence. I don't even know if they realize what they're doing when they are propagating this kind of narrative. I had a conversation with Ira Glasser a couple of weeks ago about the First Amendment, and obviously he was the head of the ACLU for a couple of decades at least, and he was the head of the ACLU in the aftermath of the Skokie, Illinois incident of the ACLU being asked to stand up for and protect the rights of free speech for literally the Nazi Party in the United States of America, and their right to express their views in a very predominantly Jewish community in Skokie, which also, by the way, was the home of many Holocaust survivors who fled and came to the United States and chose that place to be their homes. He gave such incredible examples that he saw throughout his life about how ultimately what it comes down to, we talk about freedom of speech, is we have to acknowledge that it is a dangerous thing to place the power within the hands of any government official or level of government to decide who gets to be heard and who does not. Because, and he gave many examples, but the point was, today you may like the people in charge and say, well, okay, I trust you to decide what speech is acceptable versus what is hate speech or even what is violent speech. But what about when those hands of power change? You know, what about when it turns over to someone else who then may decide, you know what, you are the one who should not be heard. Your voice should not be heard. And that's really the danger here that I think, frankly, both sides of the political spectrum sometimes get wrong. Is too often they're so short-sighted. They say, well, we don't like what this other side is saying, and so we want to silence them, or we think that this is hate speech, or this is offensive speech, or words are violence, and all this other stuff. But they're not thinking about what happens when we give up that fundamental right to free speech and put it in the hands of government. Then we have lost it forever.
And that's a perfect sort of segue into Elon Musk and what he's doing on Twitter. I'm curious on your thoughts on that. It seems like he's restoring everybody, it seems like, and his only, at this point, it seems like the only threshold to limitation on free speech is incitement to violence or death threats. So the only two things I've seen him say that those will be unacceptable on the platform. Is that the right place to draw the line? And if so, why and I really don't understand this, why are people freaking out about it?
Yeah. I saw something, I think last night I was reading something where he may have added something that's illegal. And maybe that falls under that category as well. I'm not sure, but
I know that the child porn and the child trafficking and all that is in there too. So that makes sense.
Exactly. It really boggles my mind actually to see who's freaking out. And you see the kind of like posturing or what they call virtue signaling as this whole thing plays out. I laughed. Was it CBS said like, oh, we're going to leave Twitter. And less than 24 hours later, they're like, actually, no, we're not. We're still here. And I'm curious to see as this plays out, how many of these other people who have left Twitter or announced that they're leaving Twitter end up coming back because they recognize, look, this is a platform. It's a platform. And it seems like that's Elon's intent seems to be very good in carrying out that intent. This is a platform. It is an open marketplace of ideas. You may not like what one person is saying, or you may not agree with what one person is saying. But this is my thing is like, man, just like you have a television, you can turn it off or on or change the channel. You on Twitter, you can follow or unfollow, or if you want to engage, then you can reply and you can get into a conversation. It's no different than any other aspect of our life. And it's more revealing for all these people who are like, oh my gosh, I'm going to leave Twitter. This is just so crazy. It's more revealing about them than it is about Elon Musk or anything else. Like, what are you so afraid of? What are you so concerned about that you have to, okay, fine. You want to leave the room, leave the room. That means you also are giving up your voice in this open marketplace of ideas.
Yeah, it all roads, so much of the stuff we've been talking about even thus far in terms of these ideological kinds of, excesses. All roads lead to narcissism when you get right down to it. As though we're all supposed to care that you're leaving Twitter. Like you want to turn your television off, you want to leave Twitter. I don't give a shit. Go ahead. That's fine with me.
Exactly.
Please enjoy. That's fine. And by the way, they're commenting on a business that he bought, he owns. He can close it all down if he wants to. It's his business. He can do as he pleases. Where do we get this grandiose notion? Think how grandiose that is, that people should be A, caring whether am on or not on the platform, and B, that the owner should listen to me. Do they go through their lives like that? Do they walk into McDonald's and, where's not the manager? I'm going to talk to the owner. Who's the owner of this company? And I think you got to make your hamburgers a little differently or I'm leaving. It's like, please get out of here. Isn't it? It's so odd. It's such a strange.
I think it's weird. And I think, I don't know. I got to believe that most people either don't care or are not paying attention. Be like, cool, man. That's your choice. It's a free country. Go live your life. Make your own decisions.
Well, but yet they form these little mobs that whip themselves into these frenzies, these little, and when you really study the history of mobs, I wrote a book about narcissism about 15 years ago, and I wanted to put a chapter in about pre-revolutionary France, because that was the only other sort of semi-modern period I could find where there was so much childhood trauma and narcissism. And I kept saying, there's going to be scapegoating, there's going to be guillotines. I know it's coming. And they told me it was too speculative, and now it's here we are. Here we are. The scapegoating is up. The social media is the public square. The guillotine is the cancellation procedure, and we're in it. But it's always because of there's the old book. How about that? All because of narcissism and childhood trauma. That's what really leads to that stuff. And I don't know how. Do you have any? Well, let me ask you this: how do you maintain such what you look externally to have a great deal of we used to call was it verisimilitude or something? Just you're even keeled. You're pleasant. You seem unaffected by so much of the stuff swirling about you and the things that is leveled at you. Are you inside? Are you troubled inside, or are you able to maintain that kind of positive? This is the jet lagging in me now. I can't find language, but that seemingly comfortable
outlook.
Exterior we're seeing. Yeah, is that staying inside? And if so, how do you do that? Is that some of your religious heritage? Do you have a daily practice? How do you do that?
Yeah, I think this is such an important question as we are in such troubling times where there is so much noise and there's so much fear, and people feeling like they have to self-censor. If I say this, I might lose friends, or worse yet, I might lose my job, and just all of this stuff is I think it causes a lot of concern and a lot of confusion for people, and it really just comes down to reflecting and thinking, for me, like, where do I place value? And my strength and my what's most important to me comes from within. For me, it comes from my personal relationship with God, and always knowing and understanding and reflecting and praying upon his unconditional love for me and for all of us. And so, I get attacks from all sides about all these different things, and name calling, and people attempting to smear my character and all of this other stuff. And it rolls off because of that inner strength that comes from within, from the Lord in my heart, and knowing that my goal in life is not to be pleasing or to gain the approval from any talking head on television or some person on Twitter or whatever it is. My satisfaction and my sense of fulfillment comes from just doing my best to be pleasing to God with my life. And for me, what better way to be pleasing to God than to try to work for the well-being of God's children, to try to make a positive impact on others. And as long as I'm doing that, then I am happy. I'm truly happy.
It does seem like the lack of a spiritual landscape practice, whether you want to call it religious or not, into that vacuum has flown the ideological and political excesses that we've been talking about. Do we need a new awakening of some type in this country? Is there a prescription for that somewhere?
Yeah, like you said, this is not about one religion or another. I think there is certainly a spiritual
vacuum.
We are facing a spiritual vacuum and challenge in this country, where when you look at the things that are on the headlines every day, when you look at politicians reacting to the headlines by like, hey, okay, well, we'll just pass a bill to do this, or we'll just make this statement. I think there was a tragic shooting in New York State a few months back, and the politician's response was, well, we have to ban hate speech because of the shooter, what the shooter was putting out online. I think it was, we just have to ban hate speech. They're not addressing the deeper spiritual problems with a number of these different issues that we're facing, not actually going deep and saying, hey, why are we facing the challenges we're facing as a society, as people? And I think that's much of the problem that we're seeing. I know you deal a lot with addiction and other things, and just assigning like, oh, well, you're addicted to this drug, we'll give you another drug, or we'll slap a Band-Aid on it here, not actually going to what is actually the root cause of your depression or dissatisfaction or unhappiness or this feeling of emptiness in your heart. And as long as our society continues to ignore this erosion of a spiritual foundation in our society, then the more we're going to see these problems continue to morph and perpetuate and ultimately cause this unhappiness and harm and suffering.
Yeah, I get sort of overwhelmed when I hear you say that, because I know that to be true, and I'm not sure what to do about it. It's a daunting task, and the kinds of things that people look to fix the, as you call, the emptiness or the hole in the heart, whatever you want to refer to it. If they're not reaching for drugs and alcohol, they're reaching for all kinds of other things that are not productive and not good. I recently learned about a great product line formulated using a novel scientific breakthrough. It is called Active Skin Repair, and my whole family uses it and loves it, including our new granddaughter. Actually, her parents were using it for diaper rash and other skin irritations before we learned about it. It's a baby strength spray made from naturally occurring molecule called HOCl.
The technology was just kind of really mind-blowing to me on how simple but how effective it was.
HOCl is a non-toxic, clinically proven antimicrobial molecule, been used in hospital for a long time, and it's actually produced by our own immune system. The applications are numerous: wound healing, insect bites, even eczema, rosacea, other inflammatory skin conditions.
What's really cool about it is, again, no toxicity. So you're not using any harsh antiseptics. It's non-cytotoxic. So when you're putting it on, you're killing the bacteria, but you're not hurting any of those healthy cells that your body's producing to actually help heal itself.
Active Skin Repair Spray also comes in a kid versus an adult version. Get yours at drdrew.com/skin repair for 20% off. That again is drdrew.com/skin repair for a 20% discount. Well, you've heard me praise Paleo Valley's grass-fed finished beef bone broth and the delicious meat sticks. I now want to turn it over to Paleo Valley founder and CEO, Autumn Smith, to tell you about her company's food philosophy.
I'm here to help create the products that make healthy food convenient in our modern world. The diet and the food you're consuming is absolutely related to your digestive health, to your mental health, to every aspect of your health. The devil's in the details here. And not only do we have to attend to every single ingredient, we have to support a system with whole foods. And so when we source a product, it's going to be organic, it's going to be tested for pesticides, and then it's going to be grass-fed and finished or pasture-raised. It's going to be raised on regenerative American farms.
The protein sticks that come in 8 varieties are likewise impeccably sourced and prepared.
And the fermentation process came about because there was an ingredient that I didn't like in meat sticks that's pretty widespread. It's called encapsulated citric acid, and it's derived from GMOs and then hydrogenated oil, and it just melts into the beef stick, and you don't have to label it. That's the thing. You can label it citric acid.
Make 2025 a year to cut out the chemicals and feed yourself correctly. Go to drdrew.com/Paleo Valley for 15% off your first order, 20% off when you subscribe. That is drdrew.com/Paleo Valley. I noticed early on when you got out on social media, I guess it was probably TikTok, you tended to offer, there were sort of regular meditations on gratitude, which caught my eye right away. And I noticed on Thanksgiving, you put out a big gratitude list and discussion. Talk to people about that as well.
It's easy on a day-to-day basis to get sucked into this vortex of noise and negativity and criticism and just think about all of the problems and challenges and all the things that we wished we had, but we don't, or whatever it might be. And I've just found through my own daily practice how powerful and important it is to take that time, and whether it's in prayer or reflection or meditation, to truly just be grateful. And I've been serving now for almost 20 years as a soldier, currently serving in the Army Reserves, and I've deployed 3 times to different war zones in the world. And so much of the cost of war, the reality of how fragile life is something that has been a part of my life for a very long time. And so just at a basic level, just being grateful for life, for the gift of life, and then having that lead to the introspection of, well, what am I doing with my life? How am I choosing to spend the hours of my day or the days of my week? What am I doing to have a positive impact, whether it's on the world or just my family or my friends or my coworkers, the people that I'm around every day? And just those small meditations on an ongoing basis for me have been so really, really powerful and impactful. And at those times where I feel myself like, oh man, I'm getting, the darkness is starting to creep in. It's being able to actually recognize it, first of all, be mindful of it, and then knowing what to do to go back again, to go back within and recognize, God's love and what is most important in life.
One of the other things that intrigues me about you is no, that's not the right way of framing it. You speak like someone with a great fund of knowledge, and yet I feel like your life experience. I mean, you were in the state, Congress at the age of 21. You didn't have time to get your education done. I feel like life itself has been your educational forum. Am I right? Do you read voraciously? Are you just absorb stuff because you clearly, whatever the experience has been, you've been able to, not everyone can think carefully and analytically about their experiences. They just sort of are in it. It's clear to me that whatever you've been experiencing in all these diverse and really interesting careers you've been involved with, you've learned a tremendous amount. Is it just the experience, or you have other sources that you really lean on? Like a lot of people that are successful like yourself read a lot.
Yeah, I would say it's all of the above. There was, when I was young, I don't know, I was probably 12 or 13 years old. I had this realization, and the realization really was, even at that time, I understood in an incredibly deep way that life is short, and I don't know how much time I have in this life, in this world. And so I need to make the most of that time. And so when I growing up here in Hawaii, obviously beautiful place. I grew up very much caring about protecting water and the oceans and just protecting the environment. And that's what drove me to run for office, to run for the state house. When there was an open seat, there was an opportunity to go and actually take the things that I really cared about and turn it into action to make a difference and make an impact. And it never dawned on me. Like, I heard from some of my friends, or as I was knocking on doors, people were like, you're 21 years old. What are you doing? Why are you doing this? And I felt as though, of course I should do this. There are these issues that I care very much about. And at that time, there's a decision. I could have gone to school and studied political science and sat in a classroom and talked about it with professors and classmates. But for me, it made absolutely the most sense to just go and do it. Why just sit around and talk about it? Go out and actually knock on people's doors and let them know, hey, I'm Tulsi and I'm offering to serve you and be your voice and fight for you and your families in our community in the Hawaii State Legislature. And those were the conversations that I had with thousands of people back in 2002 when I ran. And it is that same drive and that same motivation, recognizing like there is no time. There is no time. That only further became highlighted as I deployed overseas, my first deployment to Iraq, where I served in a medical unit where every single day was confronted with that high human cost of war. And those experiences and these experiences throughout my life have continued to be to provide those opportunities to go deeper and not just live on the surface.
Well, that is profound. I want to hear more about that if you don't mind. At the age of 12, was there a moment of clarity? Did something happen? Did you see something? Had something been evolving? And I mean, that's profound, right? at 13, when I barely put my socks on at 13. And that's, of course, males are particularly, it's a very difficult time for males, even more so, but to be a 12 or 13-year-old female is no easy matter either. And to have that kind of a profound insight. I mean, you've mentioned spirituality, you've mentioned gratitude, and now this profound understanding about the limited nature of our biological being, which is something most people never get to. And I think it's one of the things that I've been obsessed about through COVID. It's like we're supposed to live forever and safety uber alles. What the hell's going on here? We're biological. We have limitations on our time here. But to come to that at 13, I'm wondering if you could talk to me more about was there a moment of clarity? Was there something evolving in your life? Did you see something? Did you lose somebody? Was it something that evolved over time? Talk to us about that.
It wasn't some kind of major milestone or major event in my life that brought that realization on. It was really, I remember exactly where I was sitting in a room in prayer, just having a conversation, talking to God. And, I'm so grateful to, again, I was brought up with a lot of, with a strong spiritual foundation, and recognizing that, real religion is about having a personal, loving relationship with God. It's not about just going through the motions. It's about actually developing that and cultivating that real relationship with God as your best friend. And so I remember being in a room by myself, spending that time in prayer, and all I remember was having that moment of really being struck with the reality of how short life is, and feeling a sense of urgency, even at that young age, to not waste it, to not waste my life,
profound,
and to make the most of the time that I have.
Is profound. And whenever anybody talks about the benefits of prayer or meditation, it's things like that come in, however you want to understand it, or however it can be understood, is what people get from that. I am sort of awe-stricken and jealous at the same time that at such a young age that you could have such a profound experience. I don't know how we encourage people to get to those sorts of places. I do think that for some people, those kinds of spiritual insights don't necessarily come through these contemplative or prayer practices. They come sort of interpersonally. A lot of people can find those same kinds of insights by literally seeing themselves or the world through a new pair of glasses, so to speak, which is accepting another person's experience of you or of the world and really letting that in. I kind of feel like, in terms of improving our world, I will have an easier time selling that one than prayer and meditation, because people were so caught up in everything. I don't know that people will spend the time to do it.
I think as time has gone on, I think there are more and more people who are recognizing the value of mindfulness, the value of meditation, and whatever one's spiritual practice may be, really creating that space for solitude. I do it it's a priority for me to do that every morning, to create that space for solitude, just me by myself. And tuning out all of the noise in the world, and spending that time in reflection and in prayer, that is absolutely critical, because it is tough. There is so much that's happening, but for me, making that a priority is essential to every day.
In that little intro we played about your podcast, where Rogan is saying, you've given me faith in politicians, and thank you for doing what you do. I saw that interview, and I remember thinking to myself that is exactly how I feel when I see you being interviewed. Rather than laying that on you again, I'd sort of like to flip it and ask, why doesn't politics attract better people? Is it just too painful? What is, you were in Congress for a while. Is it too difficult to get anything done? Is it too frustrating that only people that want to get their egos massaged or, win elections, those are the only kinds of people that get in there anymore?
Yeah, that the best people that I have found in politics are the people who hate politics and who don't really want to be there, but who end up running for office and getting elected out of a sense of duty, out of a sense of responsibility.
And so once they're there, do they find it impossible and frustrating and demoralizing, or do they feel like, okay, I can fight this fight, I can get something done? Because one of the things that sort of has happened to me in the last couple of years, I'm disgusted with so many of the people in politics. I'm disgusted with what's happened to my profession. I'm disgusted with public health. This stuff is disgusting to me, and we need to. Disgust is a very powerful emotion. It makes you want to change things. And I can't be the only one feeling this way, and so I wonder that people that feel disgusted, if they feel that I've got to go do something and they do it, is it going to be equally as disgusting once they get inside, I guess is the question.
Yeah, I mean, you pull back the curtains and you see the reality of who it is that actually has the who's holding the reins of power in this country and making hugely consequential decisions on our everyday lives, on the state of our country and the impact that we are having in the world. It was, and I talked about this on one of my conversations with Rogan, was about how very quickly after I got to Congress, I saw how it's a lot like being in high school. Where you've got different cliques, you've got the cool kids over here, you've got the outcasts over here, as you see every day during votes is the only time that every member of Congress is together in one place on the House floor. And I remember one time I went up and I had some friends visiting, and I went up to the gallery and sat with them for a few minutes in between votes and just had a little bit of a bird's eye view, and was just talking them through like, okay, see that corner? That's where these people hang out. This is where those people sit, and everybody on the House floor knows it. And it is, there a lot of times the conversations are, it's so immature and juvenile, and it's incredibly disturbing when you recognize, oh, wow, like they're voting on things that have to do with our economy and taxes and our First Amendment rights and just things that are really, really important. And that once these pieces of legislation are passed, it's very hard to undo them. Very rarely do leaders in this country do the work necessary to say, actually, you know what, that bill that was passed, it actually was not good. Or, hey, maybe even you had good intentions, but the consequences have been very negative. So let's go and repeal that. Very rarely does that ever happen. And I think a lot of it is because we have leaders who are thinking more about themselves than they are about how their actions are impacting the American people, and are not spending that time going out and talking to small business owners and saying, hey, how's it going? What are the things that we in government can do to make your lives better, to make it better and easier for you to be able to have a thriving business in this country? Small businesses, as you know, they're the economic backbone of this country, the number one employers in this country. And yet it is so much harder for so many small businesses just to survive than it is for the few, multi-million or billion-dollar businesses who can afford to have the lobbyists and go get all the the tax carve-outs and all the special handouts that they get through legislation. Small businesses are like, hey, what about us? You know what I mean? And that's one example. But ultimately, the people who go to Washington, who are not there to get their egos stroked, who are not attracted at all by the glitter and the attention that they get. And they do, there is, unfortunately, this is part of the problem, is they're treated like, some kind of celebrity rather than like, hey, you're a public servant. You got hired by the people in your community to come here and do a job and not pretend like you live in some ivory tower where you're better than everybody else, because you're not. You are not.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. Is there a sense? I got to take a break in a section. When we get back, I want to talk about COVID and what happened to my profession and what seems to still be happening to it. But I just want to ask this question, which is, I have such awe for the American story and our history and the unbelievable foresight of the founding fathers. And I look to, the words of Frederick Douglass very often to try to protect me from my own, and again, this word white supremacy comes up a lot, but Frederick Douglass used it, and I understood what he means when he talks about it. And so I use him as my my shield against my own perspectivalism, my white Eurocentric, that it's where my heritage is, where it comes from. And I need to be very, very, very careful to always see other points of view. And that being said, he too, Frederick Douglass, and I have awe for the thinking and the foresight and the historical accident that this country became. Are the people that are out there on that floor of the Congress, are they even aware of the history that they're attached to? Do they have a respect for it? Or is it just again, they're just getting their ego stroked?
Obviously I can't speak for everybody there, but in my experience of having served for 8 years in Congress, there are far too few people who've been put in this position of great responsibility and great power, who've actually taken the time to understand what the vision of our founders was, what the importance and the importance that they placed in every single word that was written into the Constitution, every word that was put into the Bill of Rights, looking into the Federalist Papers, trying to better understand what was their intent, what was their vision, and then attach that to the responsibility that our lawmakers have in carrying out that vision to maximize the great potential of this country, and to uphold, to actually take those words to heart that every one of us said when we took our oath of office. And it comes with great weight. And I've had the privilege of taking that oath twice, both as a soldier and then later as a member of Congress. And it's something that I take very seriously. And it's an oath that I carry forward in everything that I do.
I feel as though people in the armed services are more conscious of it than the people that are serving.
It's real, because we're willing to lay down our lives to keep that promise. And so it's not just a matter of like, okay, cool, I got this job for a couple of years and we'll see what happens. It literally is a decision of saying, you know what, I'm willing to give everything in my life in order to protect and defend this vision that our founders had for this country and the American people.
We're going to take a couple-minute break. TulsiGabbard.com is where you can find more, get the podcast, and Tulsi and I'll be right back after this. If there was ever a time to be rationally ready, it is now. I urge you to consider getting one of the emergency kits from the Wellness Company, because TWC has 7 different kits that are customized for a variety of situations. Wouldn't be a bad idea to take a look at each, considering, say, what we've just been through in California with the fires. I was happy to have the field kit on hand, and the Contagion kit in particular is suited for what is being predicted to be the next outbreak. That would be the H1N5 or avian or bird flu. Of course, the same experts from the COVID era are freaking out about this potential pandemic, but don't panic. Just arm yourself with the meds you might need if this comes to pass. Contagion Emergency Kit contains ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, azithromycin, Tamiflu, and budesonide, an inhaler that is good for airway reactivity and tightness, as well as reducing viral replication in the airways. Go to drdrew.com/TWC for 10% off your purchase. I'm excited to bring you a new product, a new supplement, Fatty. I take it, I make Susan take it, my whole family takes it. This comes out of, believe it or not, dolphin research. The Navy maintains a fleet of dolphins, and a brilliant veterinarian recognized that these dolphins sometimes developed a syndrome identical to our Alzheimer's disease. Those dolphins were deficient in a particular fatty acid. She replaced the fatty acid, and they didn't get the Alzheimer's. Humans have the same issue, and we are more deficient in this particular fatty acid than ever before. And a simple replacement of this fatty acid called C15 will help us prevent these syndromes. It's published in a recent journal called Metabolites. It's a new nutritional C15, pentadecanoic acid, it's called. The deficiency that we are developing for C15 creates something called the cellular fragility syndrome. This is the first nutritional deficiency syndrome to be discovered in 75 years and may be affecting us in many ways, and as many as 1 in 3 of us. This is an important breakthrough. Take advantage of it. Go to fatty15.com/Dr. Drew to receive 15% off a 90-day starter kit subscription, or use code Dr. Drew at checkout for that 15% off, or just go to our website, drdrew.com/fatty15. Back with Tulsi Gabbard. That is Susan Pinsky's big project up there, so make her happy by proceeding with your stocking stuffers, as they had me say. By the way, there's a problem going on Rumble and the Rumble rants. We've got people hijacking each other's names and saying terrible things,
including mine,
including yours.
I'm not saying those things.
Yes,
just so you know.
We are aware.
Wow.
So yeah,
freedom of speech.
Again, it's not, but it's
we're still working the bugs out over on.
Yeah, not good if you're hijacking someone else's name though.
I
You got things to say it in your own name. Yeah, seriously.
Can I get a blue mark on my name?
Yeah, and by the way, I used to complain about on the previous Twitter administration. I used to have people masquerading as me giving medical advice on Twitter, and I would complain to Twitter all the time, and they would take no action. I can't imagine anything more serious than that. It's literally masquerading as a physician and then practicing without a. It's just like, this is mind-boggling to me. They didn't do anything about it. Never. I must have made 10 of those complaints, and they always came back with nothing.
Shows
anyway,
what they thought was important, right?
Oh my God, yes. And so there were lots of I had all kinds of abusive and hateful things that I would report, and they never took action on one of them. So this idea that somehow the environment is worse under Elon Musk, I'm sorry, that is just simply not true. But in any event, the COVID, as I was thinking about talking to you today, I was thinking about how traumatic COVID was in so many respects, not the least of which was being locked down. But for me, one of the big traumas was learning about what was happening to my profession, and I didn't know it, as well as what was happening to public health and didn't know it. I guess my first question would be, well, I'm interested in your thoughts on what we've just been through. I will just color it by saying, one of the things for me that's got to be corrected are the excesses of public health and the fiat authority they have to do things that are egregious without being required to defend what they do or to have any sort of threshold they have to achieve to do whatever they want under certain circumstances. That seems to me as something that needs to be remedied. But your thoughts on what we've just been through?
Oh gosh, there's so much we could spend a couple hours just talking on this topic alone. I think, well, first and foremost, let me just acknowledge the reality is that for some people, COVID poses a very serious risk to those who have, weakened or compromised immune systems, those who are elderly, and so on. There are 3 points I think I want to make on this of where our government has failed and continues to fail us. I'm sure you watched Dr. Fauci's farewell speech, and the same problems that I saw throughout, he again highlighted and reiterated in his farewell speech just before his retirement. And those are 3 big lies. The first of which has to do with masks. Fauci stood there at the podium and said, "Hey, everybody, mask up. Going into the holidays and you're going to go and be around other people, mask up." But he knows very well that when people hear him say mask up, they're thinking of like, well, let me go and get the cloth mask or the paper surgical mask, and knowing that ultimately they don't provide protection either from somebody who, may catch COVID or prevent someone who has it from spreading it. And that the only masks that offer any real kind of protection are actually respirators, the medical grade N95 N95 that are tightly fit and snug, and that have, those are the only things that actually provide any kind of protection. And yet they continue to lie about that, give people this false sense of security. The second thing has to do with the vaccines. Again, at the podium over and over, he's saying, the best thing that anybody can do is get vaccinated and get the booster shot so that they can go, and he literally said this, so that, you can go and protect yourself, protect your family members, and protect your community. Once again, perpetuating this lie that the vaccine somehow prevents you from getting COVID, which we know is false, and that it will prevent you from spreading COVID, which we know is false. So it gives people, and I've heard even nurses back during when we were in kind of the early days of COVID, she was just saying, oh my gosh, thank God I can get the vaccine now so that I can actually go and visit my grandmother who has, who has a compromised immune system. And so the danger that people like Dr. Fauci and others are creating is this false sense of security, letting this nurse, for example, think that, well, she can go and hang out with her grandmother, who's actually very concerned about the negative ramifications that could pose a threat to her life if she were to get COVID because she's vaccinated, when in fact, that lie has been exposed for what it is. And then the third thing is that Dr. Fauci, he's been questioned by Rand Paul over and over and is very indignant in his response about gain of function research. They still don't want to do any investigation, true investigation about how and where COVID originated, because they would then be forced to acknowledge the fact that there is a possibility or even a very real probability that it came from American taxpayer funded gain of function research that is not only happening in China, but in other countries around the world and also here in the United States. They're not willing to talk about this or to tell the American people the truth about this so-called scientific research that is actually posing a great risk to humanity.
Why not? Why not be truthful? I want to pile on to what you said. Just so there's no holes in any of our conversation here. In terms of masks not working, let me just follow on with that and say surgical masks do not work. Mass masking does not work. We have the Bangladesh study or the Danish study. Lots of studies that shows they don't work. People that push back and go, well, why do surgeons wear a surgical mask? So the bacteria-laden spit in their mouth doesn't fall into the surgical field. That's why surgeons wear masks, not to prevent viruses from getting out of their mouth into the respirator of the patient, nor the patient infecting the doctor. It is to prevent saliva from dropping into the surgical field. We know material masks don't work. We know that N95s do help somebody who wants to protect themselves. Much if I went in a room with a tuberculosis patient, I would wear an N95 mask, but I would never take it off around the patient. If you take it off to eat or anything else, it now has zero efficacy. So N95, for them to work, must be worn at all times. Now, if you want to do that and try to protect yourself, fine. I have no problem with that. But you are not protecting anybody else. In fact, there's some data that you might be aerosolizing things further with an N95, but we don't know that data for sure yet. So there's that. Kids masking, there is zero data on that. There's no clustered randomized controlled anything on that. We just know that it's God only knows what it's doing to kids. It is not helping them. And by the way, the incidence of serological activity in children right now is approaching 100%. So all kids have already been exposed. So masks and vaccines in children, I don't understand that at all. In terms of, the lying about, where this came from and all, it seemed like one of their primary strategies in, safety uber alles, lockdown or else, get to vaccine, then vaccine uber alles, was to crush any dissent. In addition to a farewell address, Dr. Fauci gave testimony in a case in Missouri a couple of days ago, or yesterday, must have been the day before yesterday, where he was on the record about these issues, and he was all over the place. You can read Dr. Cariati's, who's a psychiatrist I've interviewed a number of times here, thread on this. He was not. He just kept saying he's too busy to be bothered with things like the Great Barrington Declaration, and yet there's all this video of him spending lots of time crushing those dissents as somehow peripheral and marginal and don't know what they're talking about. And these were always people of extraordinary pedigree with huge backgrounds that would normally be right at the table, talking about what our policies and what our best approaches should be and best practices. It's not just that they wouldn't admit or change direction. They became sort of violently totalitarian in the way this was delivered. Yeah. Do you have any insight into what that's all about?
Just that once they saw, well, we've got this power, it became about compliance and holding on to or further abusing that power more than anything else. You saw that because
that's crazy.
I can't think of a single example, and maybe they're out there, but I can't think of a single example of somebody who said, okay, well, initially this thing came out, we don't know a lot about it, we're going to institute these restrictions, and then once they realize, okay, well, now we know more, let's lift them.
Right.
In just about every case that I can think of, it was just like, well, we have to continue. Well, we've put these restrictions in place, and we just like it was doubling down, even though the facts and science and new revelations may have proved their decisions may have been wrong, which really just exposed it really was about power and compliance. And we see this through the hypocrisy of so many of their directives and commands, where they're often talked about now, not in all circles, but in a lot of circles, how people couldn't go to church or go to a loved one's funeral. Or even have one at all, but it was fine to go to Walmart. It was fine to go to a strip bar or a liquor store. You saw the hypocrisy around, well, you can't have more than whatever it was, 10 people or 20 people, depending on whatever it was, gather in even an outdoor space together at any given time. People were getting arrested for trying to hold religious services even outdoors. But if you've got 30,000 people marching together in a social justice parade or a Black Lives Matter parade where social distancing, come on, give me a break, that's fine because the risk is worth the cause. And so you then have people in power deciding, well, we're going to decide what is worth people being allowed to gather in public places for. And then you had, of course, people in the CDC and elsewhere deciding like, well, we need to make sure the vaccine is made available based on race rather than based on who may benefit the most from getting that vaccine. So much was really revealed through these decisions that were being made by people in power, both the state, local, and federal levels, that showed more about them and what they were trying to force compliance about in our country throughout this whole period.
Yeah. I learned a lot about these public health officials were not clinically trained. Many of them were not even physicians. Many of them were pediatricians that had no training in adult medicine and had no judgment in these areas. It was incompetence. It was flat out. It was incompetence.
I think it was worse, right? I mean, it was incompetence. It was incompetence coupled with this like thing like, oh my gosh, I have power. Well, I'm gonna push this and maximize this. So it was incompetence. Like, I could almost forgive someone who's incompetent who then says, gosh, like this is new. We're making mistakes. We got to figure this out. I could accept and forgive that. But when you have incompetence coupled with a hunger for this stranglehold on power, once they got a taste of it, that is unacceptable. Absolutely unacceptable.
I agree. I agree. To me, the greatest poster child for the level of incompetence was here in California, or at least LA County. I don't remember it was California at large, but you could go to the beach, but you couldn't sit. And if you laid a towel down, you'd be arrested. You can't lay a towel down on the beach. And by the way, are you aware that the whole 6 feet social distancing and the 6 feet was invented out of whole cloth for this pandemic. You will not find an infectious disease textbook on earth with social distancing. And the 6 feet, I've talked to people who were in the room when they came up with these policies. They were trying to decide between 6 feet and 60 feet. And they just arbitrarily picked up 6 feet because they thought, well, we can get people to comply with that. Maybe it'll help. And then demanded it. And so my question is, given that it was all serendipity and incompetence and foolishness and panic and whatever, what are we going to do to curtail this so that this doesn't happen again? So at least there's a procedure where they have to be able to justify or at least justify the maintenance of some of these. Even if they do something arbitrarily, they have to tell you that it's arbitrary and they can't defend it, and they'll need to come up with something to defend it in order to maintain it. Some procedure that limits some of this success.
You know, I think a lot of this has to do with what kind of leaders we choose. You know, there were a lot of people who did not show up to vote in this last election, which actually surprised me, given everything that we've been through as a country in the last couple of years. If you are unsatisfied, if you are frustrated, if you are angry with the way that our leaders are serving or abusing their position, we're the ones who have the power to fire them. We are the ones who have the power to fire them and to hire better leaders. So, you know, just basic participation is essential. And I think for those also who pursued legal action, we saw that in some different at the state level in some cases, but also those who chose to continue to escalate it to the national level. We have to exercise the levers of power that exist to make sure that we can best protect ourselves from those who are trying to abuse their power for their own selfish interest.
You were so right. I again, as I said, I was reviewing some of the founding fathers' ideas and principles, and there was Patrick Henry apparently had a beef with the opening preamble in the Constitution. He felt that it should say "we the states" rather than "we the people," because it was supposed to be a more perfect union of states, and the states would be endowed with the rights. But in reading about that conflict, I thought, God, we forget that that's the fundamental principle of this country, which is that we are self-governing. And it has not felt anything like that, to the point where I've actually forgotten that was a founding principle. And that's, again, I spent a lot of my time is spent, Tulsi, these days either confused or disgusted. And then the fact that basic principle is sort of in the background rather than in the foreground is disgusting. It's disgusting. And thank you for re-clarifying and bringing it back up.
Yeah, thank you. I spent, in the days after I announced that I had left the Democrat Party, I got a lot of phone calls and messages from different candidates across the country, asked if I would come and help campaign for them. And I did I think I was in probably 18 states over the last 3 weeks of the election. And the message that I had everywhere I went didn't change at all. And it was speaking to not just Republicans or Democrats or independents, but speaking to everyone and asking them to share this message with others is exactly what you said, Drew, which is if you are frustrated and unhappy with those who you have hired to serve you and to lead, then it is only we, the people, who can make that change. And that reminder that we are a self-governed people. That is the vision that our founders had for us. They didn't say, as you said, we the states, or we the rich and powerful, or we the elected leaders. They said we the people, and they were very explicit in exactly what they meant in a lot of those different documents that they put out. We the people, we are the only ones who can bring about the kind of change we want to see in the leadership in this country. And we do that at a very basic level by casting our votes, by being informed and going out and making sure that our voice is heard in this election system. I understand why so many people are frustrated and angry and feel like, you know what, why waste my time and go vote? My voice will never be heard. You have all these super wealthy people like Nancy Pelosi who make all the decisions anyway. Why even bother? We have to take our country back. We have to save our country from those who are in positions of power solely to enrich themselves at every level. If we want to have, this future that the founders envisioned for our country actually be carried out, not even just for us, but imagine for our kids and grandkids and those who will come behind us, because I am so concerned that we are so quickly moving in the wrong direction. Whereas we started this conversation talking about our fundamental right of free speech is being threatened today. Can you imagine what kind of country we'll be living in 5 years or 10 years or even in a couple of years if we lose that fundamental right? And in some ways, it's already being eroded.
Yes. Oh, yes. Listen, it has, Alexis de Tocqueville wrote a book about democracy in America in 1820s. And one of his observation was that although we had the most liberal privileges of free speech as provided in the government, the actuality of free speech was highly constricted by the public square, he said. And I believe the public square, i.e. today social media, has really restricted our speech. And that's in addition to taking back the government, I think we also have to take back our freedom of expression and put it out there.
Yeah.
One of the other shocking things that happened for me is when COVID hit, my physician peers froze. They became afraid to do anything, afraid to say anything. They're still there. They're still, everything that, we're watching a lot of things happen with the vaccines. I'm hearing it all over the place from all my peers. None of them will say it out loud. And it's stuff they're just afraid to speak up for fear of the retribution of the public square. And it's real. The guillotines are out in the cancellation procedure. I understand it, but we've got to push past that.
Yeah, we do. I mean, we protect our freedom by exercising it. On that point, Drew, I mean, I've heard from some doctors and physicians whose licenses are being threatened if they dare speak out on this. And I think it's so important to note that yes, there is a level of self-censorship that's there because of, well, you don't want to be smeared, you don't want to be called names, you don't want your reputation to be undermined, your credibility to be undermined in this public town square. But there's also something even more serious at play there, where you have employers or state and local health officials who are literally threatening doctors' licenses to practice simply for speaking, having a view, having an opinion, having a scientifically based opinion, which just on the issue of COVID, we haven't even talked yet about the issue of kids who are being pushed into transition surgeries to change, to as they're identifying with one as the other. I mean, there's so many different things that are just like, well, the debate that has happened in scientific communities for so long is just like gone. It's nowhere to be found.
Yeah, it's gone. And a lot of it is that the majority of physicians are employees now. They're employed, and so they're fearful of losing their job. And they're fearful of the public square and fearful of being wrong. The gender stuff, it gets very, very complicated. I blame my profession on that one too, in that what I keep saying is, hey, our job is to find the correct treatment for the correct patient. And if we apply a treatment, medication, hormone blockers, hormones, surgeries, and it doesn't work out for the patient, that's on us, not on the patient. That's on us. We gave the wrong treatment to the wrong patient, and we need to figure that out. So that's where, I lay a lot of this, the responsibility for this stuff. But there's something coming up on I have a bunch of chat streams up here that I feel obliged to ask you about, because I don't know anything about it, and it's showing up here. Something about the World Economic Forum. Did you interview somebody recently or say something about that recently?
Yeah, no, it's something that I've been seeing pop up a little bit on social media. People who, so basically what happened was early, I don't know, maybe in the first or second year that I served in Congress, I found out that my picture and name had been placed on the World Economic Forum's website under this category they have listed as Young Global Leaders. And I looked at it and I was like, okay, well, they have different people of different political parties and from around the world that are on this website. I was never asked to join, and I was never informed by them that they had put my name and picture on their website. And I honestly didn't know that much about it. But people have said, oh, well, what did you learn by graduating from Klaus Schwab's Young Global Leaders Academy or all this stuff? And it's just, it's unfortunate that there's a lot of, I don't know, false assumptions being made, I guess. It's an organization, I've never gone to any of their shenanigans. That's a good word. I've never gone to any of their events. I didn't graduate from any, I've literally not had anything to do with the World Economic Forum. And the reason why people are concerned about this is actually very important. And I'm glad to just make clear that there is no connection between me and the World Economic Forum. You know, the World Economic Forum is essentially pushing this, and Klaus Schwab and Glenn Beck wrote a whole book about this for those who want more information. But basically, they're pushing this super globalist agenda where you have corporate powers of like the most wealthy of the wealthy attempting to create whatever they want to call it, some new world order, set the rules for the world that supersede and undermine the sovereignty of countries, undermining our democracy, essentially. And that's really what is so dangerous. And their intent, of course, they claim to know what is best for us more than we know ourselves. And why wouldn't they, these multi-billionaires? But the danger of it is exactly that they are trying to set the rules for the world and build some kind of utopian future in their own mind, but undermining our voices and our sovereignty as a country. I think that's the best way I can put it in a nutshell. So I have been very outspoken about a lot of these different issues over the years. So for anyone who questions what my record is, look at my record and you'll see how I have been talking about and warning against the very things that these people are pushing. Saying that, if I were ever, and I haven't been, but if I were invited to go to Davos is their big forum that they put on, I think it's every year. If I were invited to go speak there, I would go and speak the same kind of truth to them as I speak to anyone else, because I think it's important that no matter that we not just live within our own echo chambers, but we actually go out and vigorously engage in this marketplace of ideas that we're talking about here.
Yeah, I have no doubt that you would do so. There's another part of this. Again, this is on my mind now because of just having returned from Europe, which is this thing that's called populism and nationalism. And I delight in Prime Minister Maloney's rhetoric. I mean, I may not agree with all her politics, but I delight in her rhetoric. I just think isn't that her name, Maloney?
For Italy.
I saw a lot of that in Europe when I was there, particularly where she held up a French something, and she goes, 50% of this comes from kids pulling gold out of a mine, and so instead of bringing those kids to Western Europe, why don't we allow those countries to keep their money so they can thrive, on their own? I thought, well, it makes perfect sense to me. I dig what she's saying. Yeah. So anyway, but it made me think about other things I was seeing over there, which was I'm hearing rumbles of Scotland again trying to push independence, and being in Spain and watching people celebrate their culture and their art and their architecture. That there is a value that humans derive that is not purely negative. And we think about nationalism, and I think sometimes we think about World War II as sort of the final pathway of nationalism, but it doesn't have to be like that. And there's a certain delight that humans have, just the way the Native Americans and the indigenous people still stay connected to their culture and their identity as such, that everybody, humans, I don't know, have stronger words than like or enjoy, but it's important to us to have that connection to a culture and a heritage and a community and maybe a people even as part of that. The fact that the World Economic Forum wants to destroy that or devalue it or sort of consider it somehow dangerous or problematic, I think there'll be a massive pushback against that. I think that's kind of underway. Yeah. At least that was my sense in Western Europe. And it also made me think about us here and how we are so negative on our stuff. We are just so, there's like a hatred for, that you can feel, or negativity at least, that you can feel here that you just don't see over there. There was a relief not to have that, but to acknowledge and try to come to terms with, as I said, the horrible history that Spain perpetrated on an entire continent and that Portugal created with the slave trade. I mean, these were real historical things that these cultures were responsible for and need to be talked about honestly. But condemning an entire culture and entire people in the present moment because of that history, I'm uncomfortable with that.
As you should be, because, who are we as people if we are not willing or able to learn from the mistakes of our past? I mean, just even in our own singular lifetimes, I think that's what we hope, right? Is that every day as we move forward in life, that we continue to learn and we continue to grow from those mistakes of the past, importantly, so we don't continue making them again. And the same goes for us in the history of this country, that we do acknowledge and recognize and understand the sins of this country's past, so that we make sure that we don't repeat those same tragedies again. And that's really where, I'm proud to wear the uniform of this country. I'm proud to, salute the flag. I'm proud and get goosebumps, when I hear and sing the Star Spangled Banner, because to me, that's what that represents. It represents that freedom for us as a society, as people in this country who are proud of the potential and the foundational values and principles that make this country unique. And it is rooted in those God-given rights and freedoms that are enshrined in the Constitution. And it's up to us. It's up to us as individuals and as Americans to decide what kind of future we want to see. And so, again, when I hear people who are like, oh my gosh, look at all those American flags. And you hear this from people on television sometimes, some of these political pundits or commenters or whatever it is, that like, oh gosh, if you go to the South, they have so many American flags, and talk about it in a really derogatory manner. It makes me sad. It makes me sad because they are not recognizing how special, how special this country really is, and that specialness comes from those principles that are rooted in our Constitution. You mentioned a couple of things I want to comment on here. You talk about populism. And I remember I had a meeting with somebody in my office in Congress one day where they were shaking their heads and like so concerned about, well, what do we do about the rise of populism in America and around the world? This is just, this is of a great concern. And I said, why? Why is this of great concern? Because the people are rising up and saying, hey, you know what? We're sick and tired of you guys living in your ivory towers, you politicians, you elite, you CEOs of multinational corporations, making decisions that benefit yourselves, but come at the cost of the lives of everyday people, everyday Americans and people around the world. And that's really what's at the heart of it. And so when you look at the people who are wringing their hands over, like, what do we do about the rise of populism? They are, the equivalents of the elite that the first, people who came and fled, England and other countries in Europe came to this country to escape from. And that's it again, it's just so telling. Like, you look at who's concerned about populism. They're the people who believe that we the people exist to serve the well-being and the thriving of these multinational corporations, rather than we the people existing and living, just trying to live our lives. And that the world should not revolve, the policies should not revolve around what is best for corporations, but they really believe what's best for corporations is actually best for the people, when no, not the case.
Let me, if you don't mind, I'm going to read a tweet from Harry Truman, or a quote from Harry Truman that you tweeted a couple of days ago, which was, once a government commits to the principle of silencing opposition, it has only one way to go, and that's down the path of increasingly repressive measures until it becomes a source of terror to all its citizens. And we're sort of flirting with that as a reality, and that's what we're talking about pushing back against.
Exactly. He put it, it's almost like he foresaw what was coming or what could happen. And, we talk about politicians in Washington. Are they actually reading? Are they looking at at what our founders intended, what leaders of the past warned against. I wish more of them did, because that quote from Harry Truman, it really struck me because it is incredibly relevant to what we are facing right now in this country.
And we're sort of winding up here because I don't want to keep you too much longer. You've been very kind with your time, but I was just thinking about Dr. Fauci's testimony. One of the things we did find out in his on the record deposition was that the whole lockdown thing did come from one specific public health official who went to China and was persuaded by his peers there that the Chinese had the whole thing in hand with lockdowns, and they were geniuses in terms of their public health policy, and we just needed to pursue what the Chinese were doing, which is something I figured was the case and now has been proven. This was the Chinese Communist Party policy, which we see still going on today, that is creating essentially mini revolutions in their country and destroying their economy and doing nothing except delaying the inevitable of COVID sweeping throughout their country, as it inevitably will. Now, to be fair, they may have missed Alpha and Delta by doing what they did, which is kind of interesting. There's something to be said for that. But the COVID will, or you can't suppress a respiratory virus. It will infect everybody, and they're now finding that out. But their policy was a sham from the outset, and us following it and using something that had no scientific base, it had never been tried before, was a disgusting failure. And now they're on the record with that as their history. So I just needed to get that out there. On this Thanksgiving, I am grateful to be able to speak to the one and only Tulsi Gabbard. I thank you so much for persevering and getting back in touch with me so we could finally pull this off. And I want you to know if there's anything we can do, Susan, I think I speak on your behalf as well if I say this, that to support you, whatever pursuits you, whatever in the future you're doing, and I hope it's on a large scale, and I hope it's representing a lot of people, because we'll be right there standing behind you. Whatever we can do to support you, please let us know.
Thank you so much, Drew. It's so good to finally talk to you. Thanks for your patience, and I look forward to meeting you and Susan one of these days soon.
100%. And it's tulsigabbard.com, and listen to the podcast. I've got some people I want you to interview on the podcast too. I think you'll find very interesting in terms of people losing their jobs and having ideas and expressing themselves and losing their license because they just spoke up. But that has to stop. This has to stop. Tulsi Gabbard, everybody, thank you so much. And we'll just leave it at that. Ask Dr. Drew is produced by Caleb Nation and Susan Pinsky. As a reminder, the discussions here are not a substitute for medical care, diagnosis, or treatment. This show is intended for educational and informational purposes only. I am a licensed physician, but I am not a replacement for your personal doctor, and I am not practicing medicine here. Always remember that our understanding of medicine and science is constantly evolving. Though my opinion is based on the information that is available to me today, some of the contents of this show could be outdated in the future. Be sure to check with trusted resources in case any of the information has been updated since this was published. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, don't call me, call 911. If you're feeling hopeless or suicidal, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255. You can find more of my recommended organizations and helpful resources at drdrew.com/help.